What's up, Liron here. Today I'll be reviewing work by Manel Plana and I'll recreate one of his paintings. What's up, Liron here. Thank you for joining me in another episode of Painting Masters, and today, as I mentioned, we're going to look at work by Manel Plana, a Spanish watercolor painter. His work, he really pushes the Impressionism all the way to its limit, so that it's almost abstract, but it's not. I think you're gonna really enjoy his work, and you wanna stay till the end of the video because I'm gonna actually paint one of his paintings, recreate it, show you how it was made, because I know many times I've been asked to do that, and I try to when I can, and now it was a good time, so I decided to recreate one of his paintings. I think you're gonna really enjoy the process, okay? So with that being said, let's get started. Okay, so let's get started with looking at the paintings. I'm going to keep this brief because I have a lot of paintings and I want to do the painting process in the end, so I don't want this video to be like an hour long. So we'll get started and you're going to see some very different things today. I promise you that. And also, I will do my best to not zoom in and zoom out and give you dizziness. So let's start with this first one. And it's just beautiful. I can feel the sense of light from this, and you know, this is really not typical of me. I usually look at work that's a little more realistic, and we're going to look at some of his works that are a little more realistic, but this is really unlike most of the things I show you, and you will see some interesting things. For example, he actually paints the outlines of things, so like this could be a shadow on the roof, but there's the outline of this tower thing. I just love everything here, and if you look at it from afar, zoom out a bit, which I won't do right now, I may do it in a second, you will see that the large shapes work really well. So you've got light coming from the back, casting a shadow on the beach with all of these small buildings or large buildings with varied shapes. You have these triangular and rectangular rooftops, and they all cast a shadow onto the beach. I'm not sure what these are, but that's probably not people because it's a little too big to be people, but who knows, maybe you get the proportions wrong here. I love the highlights left on the palm trees. Now I'm going to carefully zoom out just a bit and notice the large shapes, and notice how beautiful this entire area is, almost completely entrenched in the shadow, aside from some of the highlights that he left again here and there. And then we have all of this right side of the painting that's much lighter. I love the way he plays around with warms and cools, so you get both these kinds of bluish tones, and then you have a lot of yellows and browns, and he seems to be using a lot of French ultramarine, a lot of maybe burnt umber, something like that, some raw sienna or yellow ochre, or some kind of a nice little warm yellow. And I love it. Let's move on to the next one. This was one of my favorites originally for multiple reasons. If you look at this tree, for example, it's so funny. If you look at this tree, it looks like really like you can see the texture of the tree, but that's actually the paper's texture, the dry brush. Now, I will say this. I just love it, and again, I don't have a good explanation for it, but what you can see here is a very good control of the medium. So you have a lot of wet in wet and a lot of parts that merged, like the bottom parts of the trees here merged with the shadow. The top part of this tree merged with the shadow, but within that you also have some very harsh edges and dry brush, and this the shapes of the windows here. Now, if you look at the overall composition, once again, because that's what makes a painting beautiful, it's the overall composition. You'll notice how you have a very centered composition, unlike many paintings that you would see more frequently, that things are off to the thirds or top, bottom third, right, left third. Here we have this big building here. Then we have a more well-lit building, and finally a building that's more in the shadow. There's some people here maybe, but it just works so well, and all of the shapes are interesting. The thing, I think the reason why I find his painting so attractive is that the underlying basics of composition and color harmony and temperature and the variety of brush strokes, it all works, the freshness of the paint, it all works really well. So the basics actually make up the painting. And here you have a very rare example of an artist that only uses the basics. He doesn't seem to care too much about the details or being super accurate or literal with his expression, but the overall fundamentals work really well, which I love. Let me zoom out just a bit so you can see this in a maybe a more zoomed out context. I absolutely love this one. Let's look at some more, and we'll have to pick up the pace a bit. So here we have another building, another set of buildings, very rounded, and you can tell, you can read what's going on here. These look like kind of old European buildings. I don't know exactly from what time period. You let me know. They have this rounded quality to them, kind of like Bauhaus, but probably not, because I don't know anything really about architecture aside from what I like to look at. There are some people here, and I love how he negative paints around the figures and then adds shadows. It seems so basic, but it works so well. If you want to really see it for what it is, just squint your eyes or take a few steps back and you'll really get a good understanding of what his painting is all about. You get a really good sense of light and shadow in these. And notice with the peripherals of the painting, he's not worried about the details on the top left or on the left area or on the right area. Really, these areas kind of fade to the side. They're not as important. What he wants to do is draw you into this area of focus. Let's see what else we have here. This really blew me away. This scene is, if you take a few steps back or squint your eyes again, this will look like a photo. It's so good, and his ability to simplify is so good. And you could argue that maybe this is lack of skills or something like that, or lack of ability to put in the details. But I would say that if he wants to, he can. I would argue that because his skills look so good. And then while I'm doing my research, I found one painting that's going to be the last one I'm going to show you, in which he actually is very accurate and puts in some more details. So I have proof that this is really a matter of choice, and you can tell when someone is skilled. And this is beautiful. This is what you would expect more of, maybe an oil painting that's very simplified with all of these strokes, especially with the buildings in this tiny village. A lot of different brush strokes that put in some of the details you need, but nothing more than that. But it has the transparency and the translucence and the spontaneity of watercolor, and how a lot of the parts of the wash merge. It's just fantastic. Let's see what else we got here. Now here I have to zoom out a bit because this is really a low quality picture, but I did want to include it just because look at it. It's so beautiful. And again, you can tell where the shadow's coming from, where the light's coming from. You can tell, for example, that this architectural detail here, this pole or whatever pillar, then you get this rounded shapes wrapping around it, and then this part protruding outwards and casting this probably edge of the shadow, and it's just so beautiful. It reads so well as well, and just amazing. These small details here, and it kind of looks like even a kid would do something like that, but his planning is so smart that it works really beautifully. Next up, we have a lot to go through. So the bottom painting is the one I will be painting for you. Okay, as you've seen in the introduction probably, and by doing this I learned how much skill it took to just paint this seemingly simple scene. Top part I love as well, very different approach. You can tell you can see the pencil lines, but really all that's necessary is there. The composition is interesting, really interesting, by the way this shoreline meets this tower. Lots of highlights, interesting shapes, shadows, everything. It has everything. A lot of color harmony and balance between warms and cools. There's a lot of warmth in the oranges, and then the purples add the kind of coolness to it. This one's a little more balanced because it is more neutral, so he skewed it less to the sides of the temperature spectrum, if you will. It's all in the middle, but still there is a lot of interesting variation. It's very fresh, very alla prima style, not too much messing around with it. Nothing's overworked, really. Here are two other scenes. Again, very beautiful. I love that he has this variety of edges as well. You can see he did all of the background wet in both of these, but then you have some details that were done wet on dry, and it looks so good. And then a bit of dry brush inside the wet and wet, which I'm not sure how he was able to achieve that. Probably some parts were wet, some parts weren't. but it just looks so well and it works so well. This is the only painting that really looks different from his usual stuff, so I hope it's his. It actually says M. Plana, which is his signature, so I think it is his, but it's very different from the rest, as you'll see. We have another one now. I have to zoom out just a bit as well. And you'll notice, you know what, let's zoom out extremely with this one, because I really want you to feel the sense of light shining on the roof of this beautiful, beautiful structure. I love these triangular shapes that have a name. I know they have an official name in architecture. I love these. And the trees and the fence and all of the negative painting that he does looks so good and so fresh. None of his washes really have any backgrounds. It's all very fun. What I would be interested in is knowing how large these pieces are, because it is a challenge producing these even washes with very large pieces of paper, but who knows. Another one, I love this, and I love the undertone of yellow that he has in many of his paintings. They feel very yellow and sepia, and I love that it actually pulls me into the atmosphere, into the vibe of where he is. I believe most of these are from Spain, from many different regions, and it's beautiful. I know there's one from Cadaqués. I know there's some from Barcelona. Catalonia, I guess, which is separate. There's just a lot of different regions here. Notice the composition here, very interesting, pulls you into this area, which is the center of focus and attention. A lot of these sharper contrasts, then a lot of details. Well, not a lot of details, but some details in the shadows. And it works so well. Notice how there is this structure here. The rooftop has a highlight on it, but then the building in the back. He just goes to show you how you can in one go put in so many details that it's just really impressive. Another one, I love the perspective here, how everything moves into the inside the picture, and this looks maybe like a market scene looking at it from above, maybe. I'm not sure what the type of paper is, because it does look like it has a very different texture than most papers, but notice how just with some brushed strokes, he indicates everything you need to know. That's incredible. Another one of my favorites here, really. I love the red and how it pours into the green of the trees. All of the boats and people here, this way upwards and around that kind of a cliff or a castle. I haven't been there, and if you know where that is, it's beautiful, and I would love to visit there. It's such a beautiful interpretation of scenes. All of these, I forgot how you'd call these, like shading things that shade you when you're in the beach. I forget, like umbrellas. I can't believe I remembered that, and I can't believe it took me a moment to remember that. But in any case, let's move on. I love this, looking downwards, all of the buildings, all of this huge abstraction. There's barely anything here. Some people, some fences. And by the way, his drawing is quite accurate when it comes to the composition and everything. It feels very pure too. I wonder if he used pencil for that. Another beautiful, beautiful work. We're going to run through these because I don't want this video again to be too long. This one really captivated me because it feels like close to sunset. It's a very unique scene. Cliffs next to some sheds. Maybe this is a quarry, you call it. I think maybe it's one of those things. I don't know, but it's beautiful. And notice how you have these purples here and some greens and some oranges. A lot of secondary colors that look fantastic together. A lot of French ultramarine, again, he uses in his work. This another beautiful kind of rural scene. The rural sides of so many countries are just beautiful. This one really captivated me. Another bit of an unusual work, I would say, when you look at the subject and the execution. Very interesting as well. I love the red here. I haven't seen a lot of this red in his work. And notice how he hints at all of these details near the horizon. They look beautiful. By the way, I was recommended by one of you to review Manel Plana, so thank you, whoever that was. I'm very happy I discovered him as well. Notice this kind of cityscape from the top. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful, and you can tell that you can see the buildings and the trees, and it looks so sketchy. This one is really, in particular, sketchy. Just take a few steps back, take a look at it again, and you can see everything is here. And I would argue that to create such a good abstraction, you need to have really, really good skills in just art
principles in general. I love this thanks to the color combination. So this red and blue work really well. And this is all crooked. It's on the side. You can see some dry brush strokes here, and you can tell this looks like a rounded brush. You know, the ones with the rounded tip. It's a bit hard to describe, but it's still a small one. It could be an oils brush as well. And the windows here, it looks so beautiful. This part melts into the sky. Was it done deliberately or not? I have no idea. Just really, really cool. We're getting close to the end, I believe. Yeah. Okay, so this is another beautiful one. And I love the contrast of the warms and cools. You get the blue sky and then the orangey buildings. And you know me, you know that's not my usual style, but something about his work really captivated me. And notice how he approaches also the composition is so simplified near the bottom. And in general, it goes against many rules that we've been taught, but it still works excellent. Another really, really simple one. If you can tell what's in here, some buildings, an awning, some people, maybe another building and street corner. This is actually similar to the painting I did outside today in terms of what's in there. That's very interesting. And finally, okay, so we have this one and then the last one, the red here, and this combination here, I love those shapes, those colors. When you get this warm red here, almost orange, this warm yellow, warm blue, and finally the trees here. This is the perfect primary palette for me. I love these three. And by the way, if you know what they are exactly, I'd be happy to know. I could guess, but if you know better than me, I'd be happy to know. Notice all the shadows casting on the floor and then on the wall. And it all really complies with the basic rules of composition and perspective and color harmony. But the actual details aren't there, but it still complies with it. And notice, by the way, I think he drew these in yellow. He did an underpainting of a drawing that's yellow, which is incredible. Next up, and the last one, and here's the proof that he can actually draw accurately and beautifully as well. This is, I think, a complex scene to draw as well, because it's from above. There's this fair or circus or amusement park. All of these people, and then there's this roundabout. A lot of complex rounded shapes to be put in perspective and the angle, and it just looks beautiful. I love how he portrayed the little people here. And there's this van here, all of these larger structures and all of these amusement park little theme rides and stuff like that. Beautiful, beautiful. I don't know what that is. That may be smoke, that may be something else, but just fantastic. And this is really different in the entire scenery of his works, because this one really does require some more attention to detail, some more compositional skills, and it just looks beautiful. So this is the proof, and now I proved it. So now the part we've all been waiting for. I'm gonna finally paint one of his scenes, the one that I showed you earlier, and kind of try and get into his mind and figure out how he did what he did. So let's get started.
Okay, so the moment we've all been waiting for, and I'm gonna keep my workspace fairly small here just because I want this process to be fairly quick. So we'll start with the drawing, and I'll just suggest whatever is necessary. So here, if I'm taking measurements, I can see that the mountain starts around here, so about a third. And I want to pull that kind of line all the way to this edge, and hopefully that'll give me enough room here for some details, some areas of interest over there. Next up, we have this shoreline that's around the middle, so that's just around here. I'm gonna place that in. We have these, all of these buildings here. Now the general composition of those, and hopefully you can see well, is kind of like, I would say, this, with this pointy high point around here, like so. Then we have these buildings coming from the sides, and I may mess up some of that, but that's fine. I'm just trying to keep this process fun and lighthearted. And then we have a few boats, so we have like 1, then 2, 3, and then we have this small shed here in the background. I'm going to start with the boats, and then I'm going to start clarifying the buildings around this area. So one boat is kind of like this, and I'm trying really not to overdo it, not too many details. That's the inside part of the boat. Then we have a second boat like this, like so. Finally, the last one, I'm gonna put that, I'm trying to figure out how to put it in a more interesting way. Let's do it like that. Let's change on top of his painting a bit. And we have a shadow coming across the scene like that. It's just amazing what he can do with so little suggestions. We have this window here. There's quite a strong highlight right around here, like this kind of a tower shape. And finally, we have these this block of buildings. And here you really have to allow the brush and the paint to do the work. I'm going to try and just indicate a couple of very gentle lines, but it's not going to be a lot because I do want my brush to tell the story here rather than having a very tightly knit drawing. Also, especially if I'm trying to recreate the way he did it, which again, he really abstracts stuff and drops a lot of details, but still his impression is impeccable. Such a beautiful thing. And we're pretty much done and ready to paint. So let's talk about painting strategy, okay? Because this is really important as well. What I'm gonna do is start with a very pale wash for the sky. The colors seem to be ultramarine, French ultramarine, and maybe burnt umber or something like that. I do have sepia, which is close enough, so I'll probably be using both of these. So I'll start by wetting the sky with this very pale wash, as you can see in the reference. Then I'll do this darker area, allow it to connect to the sky here and there so it bleeds out, and then this area doesn't take too much attention. Continue downwards with negative painting around the houses and everything here. And then I'll go back into this area, fill it up, and hopefully that works out nicely. It doesn't seem like he did any wash that really covers the whole page, so there's no need to do any of that. So I'm going to start with a bit of French ultramarine. This one is, I believe, Daniel Smith, though it could be SAA. It's muted down a bit. I'm going to use just a bit of alizarin crimson here. And I'm just going to go for it, and we'll see what happens. Kind of like that. I'm just going to enjoy myself really with this process. I don't want to overthink it. I really want to just enjoy this kind of thing. There is a bit of warmth here and there, so I'm going to add that in without overworking. Now, while this is still wet, I'm going to mix some very dark combination of French ultramarine and sepia. Now we just have to make sure that it's not too dark, because that can happen sometimes. I'm going to leave a bit of dry brush here. I don't know why, because I saw him do that as well. The original piece is a little larger, I assume, which could lead to some different results. And of course, there's more room for detail when you work a little larger, but we won't let that stop us from producing something cool here. Now, right now, this is the darker value. Or rather a mid value in the entire context. This was exactly my point. In the entire context of the painting, this is actually a mid value. It may look a little dark right now, but once we put in the shadows, especially of these buildings, it's all gonna become much clearer. And we're pretty much done with this part. Now we're off to this bottom part. Now here it's a little warmer. I'm gonna add a bit of burnt sienna to this sepia as well. And I'll start to work from left to right again. And I will leave plenty of these highlights here that will be the shapes of the of the buildings, some windows, some stuff like that. I'm gonna add later on. So here we have these, and again, I'm just thinking of these in terms of the abstract shapes that these are. Add some more water to the mixture so it doesn't get too dark, and continue making my way all around these different structures. We have this tower, we have this kind of a rooftop shape here. Like this. This ends here. This continues here, but notice the intricacies in the shadow. This is really incredible that he was able to, what he was able to achieve here. It's really incredible. Like this. I want to add already wet some of the rooftops here that I see, like this. So, because I do see some of that. There's some windows here done wet as well, kind of like this. Now here I need to darken things up a little. Okay, this building should be darker, but we're gonna go back to that. Maybe yellow it up with a bit of raw sienna right here. And I'm gonna continue. It looks like a good idea. We'll keep things flowing for a while, like this, all the way up to the boats. I could even cover the boats, no problem. Just avoid the highlights on the boats. Now we're gonna need some blue for that coast, and it's gonna be fairly light. I'm just gonna place it in, see what happens, like this. Shouldn't be too dark, shouldn't be too light. I'm gonna add a bit of alizarin to it because it seems like in the painting he actually warmed it up or neutralized it a bit, and he actually left some highlights here near the bottom that I missed. You know what, I'm gonna try and dab these out real quick. I have some toilet paper in my back pocket, so let's do that right from here. That's right, and we're gonna leave some of those highlights here. My wash isn't gonna be as even as his, unfortunately. That's fine. There's a lot of skill goes even to paintings that may seem simple at first. There's so much skill that goes into them. It's amazing, really. So now we have some general structure to work with. Now here we need to warm it up and also darken it. So back to the sepia, back to the burnt sienna, like this. If this process ends up being a little too long, I'll probably cut some of it out, or maybe do like only show the highlights. We'll see about that, I'm not sure still. Here things get a little darker, so here we go. Then go back to some light. Now here we have this blue shape. So he put it like this, and it looks like he put it really without worrying about it too much. So I'm gonna try and recreate that same style of work. And here this is still wet, so I can't do too much accurate work. So I think I'm just gonna let this part dry a bit, then come back and add some darker parts. I don't want to play around with it too much, but I'm actually considering putting in this shadow already. Shadow that you see here. Even though it's not gonna be as striking, but I'm gonna put it like this. I'm gonna put in the darkest darks here. Then I'm gonna let it dry for a while, and we'll see what happens. Maybe even let this merge into the sea in case it does. You see it's running. I actually like the way it looks, so I'm gonna leave it like that. I wanted to add a bit of maybe a bluer than he did it edge here to the rooftop, like this. Some hints at edges here, and the entire left section of that building should be darker. He hinted that there's a directional change in the building, so I'm putting a bit of very light pale paint. I'm just filling it up, and this way the white is gonna match the color scheme as well. It's not gonna be pure white. So you see I'm just filling in some of the gaps here with this mixture I just did. And with that being said, let's allow this a few moments to dry, come back and add some more details. Okay, so this is all dry now. Luckily, I have one window in the apartment in which there's direct sunlight, so that really helps with the drying process. So next up, I just have to figure out, I did do a few things a little differently. He did this part lighter, his sky wash is more even, because as you know, it takes much more skill than it appears to even paint the simplest of scenes. But in any case, I'm gonna dumb down that highlight just a bit, because I should. And now let's move on to some more main stuff. So a lot of burnt umber I feel like is necessary, and I'm gonna darken this entire thing up. I'm gonna mix some burnt umber and French ultramarine, make this a little sharper of an edge, like this. There is some indication of maybe more boats under this shed here. And now let's move on to the main boat. So the first one has quite a lot of burnt umber in it. And I haven't been using a lot of burnt umber, and I just decided spontaneously like 2 or 3 days ago to pop out the tube that I got a long time ago and use that. And what's funny is that just the day after I decided to review Manel's work, so that worked out really fine and really in a good order, let's say. So now I'm gonna extend this shadow a bit here. Now near the top of this boat, I do want to add some wet and wet, and maybe we'll need to wait a little longer most likely, but I'm just gonna put it in. Now the next boat is a little more blue, but a little lighter. So I got rid of some paint from the brush because I didn't need as much. You see it's very wet still. maybe blue it up a little more, like this. Combine the two. Again, you want to merge as many areas that you can if you want to create a good, easy to read painting. This really helps. Now we're going to switch to a bit of a darker burnt umber here. Maybe let's add some French ultramarine. This I really want to darken because in the reference it's quite dark. And this part also extends like this, so I want to get that effect in. Like so. Now I want to go back and revisit that first boat and add some. He did it in burnt umber, but I think I'm going to do it with more of a French ultramarine. And I'm just going to place that in here. Now the second boat also has a bit of that kind of same thing going on here. I may go back and do that with a dry brush later on. Now there are the seats inside the boat, so let's get that in. I'm going to use this thin brush for that. So that's one, that's two, kind of detail inside it. Now I think there's supposed to be a person here, so I'm going to add that in. It looks like a person. Actually, it looks like there are quite a lot of hints of people here. Now with French ultramarine, I want to add, I really am trying to keep this process rather short. So we have this leg here. We have another kind of leg here. What I do want to get is that wavy pattern that he got here. Notice how beautiful it is. That wavy pattern. All the way up to the right where it lightens up a bit. Like so, but he did negative paint around one of those poles that I missed. That's fine. I'm going to add another one right here. This is all in the shadow. This is, again, a bit of negative painting. And now you get this indication of there are some of the supporting poles or beams or whatever that is. Now here, I honestly have no idea what he put, but he used some very pure blue. So I'm going to do the same. I'm adding a bit more burnt umber to the mix because I want to connect this person to the shadow under this. And even though I indicated that shadow, I think it will be helpful to connect all of these shapes into the shadow, so I'm repainting it. And now that leaves us, I think, only with the windows and details like that. So I'm going back to my blue, adding a bit of burnt umber, but mainly blue because I do want to keep that at a safe distance. I don't want it to feel too warm, too close to us. We have some windows here. This is really some light indications. His ability to abstract whatever he sees is really incredible, and trying to learn that I think is very valuable as well. We tend to put so many details in, especially when we work outside. It's just so beneficial to get rid of many of these details and focus on the essence of the scene. Now I'm going to place some windows here closer to us. I did want to add these dark. I want to draw these on the awning. I don't feel like I have a good spot to work on. Let's try it out. Let's see. So there's this and this and this and this. Okay, that works. I think with that, we're pretty much done. You know what? I'm going to add a bit of dry brush to this boat right over here. Maybe some more indications of wires or something like this running across. There are quite a lot of imaginary details here under that shed, but I think really with that we're done with this. So let me hold it up so you can see some of the details a little better. And let me know what you think of this in a comment down below. Okay, so this is fully dry now, and I won't leave you hanging. I know you always want me to remove the tape, so I'm gonna do just that. As I talk now and conclude this. I won't sign this because I don't sign paintings that I do based on other people's paintings, aka studies, but that's fine. So removing it. Now this tape isn't so good, so sometimes you'll get leaks like that, sorry about that, but it will create a nice little border for at least most of the areas around it. Let's see here, last one for the sky, really nice. So I really hope you enjoyed this. Let me hold it up. I really hope you enjoyed seeing this cute little process. A lot of skill that goes into planning these scenes. Like if I had not seen his painting, I wouldn't have thought necessarily to simplify it in that way. And it's really nice to enrich yourself using someone else's expression and then incorporate that into your style. A few things that inaccuracies, like in my style, I would say I definitely didn't get this wash even or that wash. A lot of it does have to do with the paper. This isn't the best paper. I also painted on the other side. This isn't the best of the best, but it is quite good for these quick sketches. So anyway, with that being said, let's change the angle and wrap up this video. So this is it for today. I really hope you enjoyed seeing Manel's work and then having me recreate one of his paintings. I'm really trying when doing that to get into the mind of the artist, and I think I was quite successful with this one. Of course, doing these studies teaches you just how much skill goes into even the smallest, appearing at least, the smallest paintings. You know, there's just so much skill that goes into it, and you can tell. You can tell when someone is skilled, even if the style they work in is very abstracted and it's borderline not realistic, but it is in his example, I think. You can still tell when they know how to use the medium properly, when they understand the basics of composition and of color harmony and all of those good stuff, and the large shapes that make up the scene that are responsible for like 90% of a scene being interesting and good. So I want to thank you for watching. Don't forget to give this video a like if you enjoyed it. That really helps YouTube show it and share it with other people. Let me know what you think of this longer format where I show the paintings, then actually do one of them. It makes the video a little longer, no doubt about that. And lastly, subscribe if you still haven't. I have tons of other videos like this one, a lot of Painting Masters episodes, the paint show, and I've got the painting processes and a lot of interesting stuff. I want to thank you so much for being the best audience ever. On Saturday, I'm going to post a video of me vlogging outside and showing you the painting process of this juice place, and I think it turned out really, really awesome. By the way, I am considering making the Painting Masters episodes on Tuesday, always on Thursdays. Okay, I'm considering it. Let me know if you want me to make the schedule permanent for that kind of thing, so that you know that every Thursday it's Painting Masters. And I will catch you again in another vid real soon.